over the years, I've met quite a few really sincere spiritual seekers who were deeply devoted to the study of Advaita Vedanta. And yet, after many years, or even after decades of study, they somehow managed to remain completely unscathed, so to speak. Instead of gaining spiritual growth or being transformed in any way, they remained unchanged, just as miserable and ornery as they were before. Why does this happen sometimes? Well, I've noticed that many followers of Advaita Vedanta seem to lose sight of its main practice, the practice of self-inquiry, Atma Vichara. Self-inquiry means to turn your attention away from worldly activities and direct it within yourself to engage in a deep inner exploration. An exploration in which your goal is to discover your essential nature, pure consciousness, the true self, Atma. The problem for some people is, instead of turning their attention within, their attention is mostly focused on the scriptures, texts, and commentaries where the teachings of Vedanta are found. To focus mainly on spiritual teachings and principles instead of self-inquiry is a bit like reading intriguing cookbooks without cooking anything, or studying detailed maps without going anywhere. This shows how some seekers fail to use the teachings of Advaita Vedanta as originally intended to guide their practice of self-inquiry. This happens to be a really common problem, so in this deep dive video, I'd like to explain to you how the teachings of Vedanta are meant to guide or direct your personal practice of Atma Vichara. The study of Advaita Vedanta is totally different than the study of academic subjects like geography, history, or science. The purpose of textbooks on these subjects is to provide you with detailed and accurate information. But the purpose of Vedantic scriptures and texts is not to merely convey information, not even information about topics like reincarnation, Maya, or the nature of Ishvara. Gathering more and more information is not the point here. Self-inquiry is. It's best to understand Advaita Vedanta not as a body of spiritual knowledge or as a collection of profound spiritual teachings. Instead, Advaita Vedanta is a guidebook, so to speak. Guidance for your spiritual journey, your practice of Atma Vichara. It's kind of like a map that can show you how to metaphorically follow in the footsteps of the rishis, the sages of ancient India. By following their teachings, you can discover what they discovered so long ago. The rishis' practice of self-inquiry led them to gain perfect contentment and freedom from suffering, both during this lifetime and after. They called this goal moksha, liberation or enlightenment. According to the rishis, discontentment and suffering arise because you falsely identify yourself with your body and mind. When your body is sick, you say, I am sick. When your mind is agitated, you say, I am agitated. But really speaking, you are a conscious being. You're not a physical object like your body, nor are you a non-physical object like your mind. You have a body and mind, but you're completely independent of them. So problems like illness and agitation belong to your body and mind. They don't belong to you. When you discover your true nature to be pure consciousness, and that your consciousness remains utterly unaffected by the problems of your body and mind, then you can gain complete freedom from suffering, just like the rishis did. Now, the question is, how can you discover what the ancient rishis discovered? Well, to discover a new planet or a new kind of subatomic particle, you not only need to know where to look, but you also need to know how to look. Scientists use special instruments to make their discoveries. Astronomers use orbiting space telescopes, and physicists use gigantic particle colliders. So, what special instrument should you use that can actually lead you to discover your true nature? Well, if you are following in the footsteps of the rishis, you should certainly use the very same technique or method of self-inquiry that they used. Their method is a powerful step-by-step process of negation, a special technique known as Adhyaropa, apavada. Adhyaropa means to make a hypothesis or a supposition, like consciousness is a tiny flame shining within. A scientist who makes a hypothesis will test it rigorously by means of various experiments. In a similar way, after making a supposition, like consciousness is a tiny flame, you also have to test it. How? First, by turning your attention within and directly examining your own experience. Then, having failed to find that tiny flame in your experience, you can negate your supposition and conclude consciousness is not a tiny flame. This negation is called apavada. It's the second step of the method. And this negation is then followed by another supposition, Adhyaropa, and then by another negation, apavada, and so on, one negation after another. It's not as complicated as it might seem. I described this method thoroughly in a video, Beyond Words, Reaching the Supreme Truth. You can find a link to the video in the description below. You might have heard this method referred to with the Sanskrit expression neti, neti, not this, not this. The repetition used here suggests that many steps of negation are involved, not just one. For example, my true nature is not male or female because gender belongs to the body. My true nature is not healthy or sick because illness belongs to the life force of prana that enlivens the body. My true nature is not calm or agitated because all mental states belong to the mind. A traditional metaphor explains the step-by-step negation by describing how an inchworm crawls along the grass. It has to let go of one blade after another as it grabs onto each following blade. In this way, the tiny inchworm can travel a great distance, one blade at a time. Another metaphor that I especially like to use compares this method of negation to crossing a wide stream by walking on a series of stepping stones. You have to leave each stone behind as you step on to the next one, bringing you a bit closer to the other side. This shows how you have to leave each supposition behind as you formulate a better one, a supposition that more accurately represents the inner truth you seek. Finally, all suppositions are left behind when you discover your true nature. Most traditional teachers of Advaita Vedanta consider this special method of negation to be absolutely indispensable for the practice of Atma Vichara. They often quote this line, Adhyaropa apavada bhyam nishprapancham prapanchyate. Through the method of Adhyaropa and apavada, the indescribable is described. The inconceivable is grasped. The transcendent, absolute reality, Brahman, is brought within the reach of us mere mortals. Without this method, self-inquiry can be unending, hopeless, like trying to find the end of a rainbow, or like seeking the ever-receding horizon. But there's a problem here. Many of today's spiritual teachers seem to have somehow failed to gain access to traditional Vedantic scholarship that's essential for understanding the importance of this Adhyaropa apavada method, and equally essential for knowing how to use it properly. As a result, they use other methods instead, methods that are simpler, shorter, and more direct. Their teachings are found in the recent Neo-Advaita movement and in the so-called satsang teachings that have become quite popular here in the West. Academic researchers have studied these shortcut methods and named them immediatism, the direct, spontaneous, unmediated insight into absolute reality, insight that's achieved with little or no prior spiritual practice. Some modern teachers who seem to fall into this category of immediatism include H.W.L. Punja, Ramesh Balsekar, Muji, Rupert Spira, Gangaji, and many others. All their teachings are more or less based on Advaita Vedanta, but those teachings are presented without using the traditional methodology. This shortcut approach might actually work for some people, especially for great spiritual prodigies who are uniquely blessed and can somehow make the mighty leap in a single bound all the way from this limited, finite realm of worldly suffering to the infinitely vast, transcendent realm of Brahman. But I suspect that such prodigies are quite rare. Maybe as rare as inchworms that can jump from one side of a river to the other. The fact is, ordinary spiritual seekers need all the help they can get. I certainly did. We need a lot of stepping stones to cross the wide river of suffering and ignorance. Fortunately, those stepping stones are carefully laid out before us by the traditional teachings of Advaita Vedanta.